Pleasure for me to be here. I've had a good afternoon. Spent some time with Jane and with Pauline, just talking over some of the local issues that that are live at the moment. We also went to meet with the head of education and the executive director of education and talked a bit more about some of the issues that are pertinent to Fife at the moment. I had a nice tour of the school from the head teacher and Caroline as the rep. That was lovely. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk to all of you now, and I am going to focus primarily on the statutory ballot that is now just about live, right? The ballot opened on Wednesday of last week, Wednesday the 12th of November. We've had quite a big build up to that, and you would have received, I hope, on Friday afternoon email notification that we're having to reissue the ballot because of a little typographical error, which really, in the grand scheme of things, should make absolutely no difference whatsoever, but we can't trust that employers won't make something of it, such as the draconian nature of the anti-trade union laws in this country, so we're taking no chances. This ballot is too important for us to put it at risk, through something like that, so the ballot papers are going to be reissued on Wednesday of this week, so 19th of November. Civica in London will be sending you out fresh ballot papers. They will be differently coloured from the ones that you've already received, or the envelope will be differently coloured from the one that you've already received, and you're asked to discard the old one and make sure to put your crosses in the relevant places on the new ballot paper, and then all should be well. Hopefully all should be well. So yes, so I'm going to talk about the importance of that ballot, and I'm going to give you 21 reasons, right? 21 reasons why you and your EIS colleagues should vote yes in this really important ballot. So yes for strike action, yes for action short of strike. Why do you think I've put together a kind of contribution for this afternoon that is built around 21 reasons? Why do you think I've done that? 21 hours, right? Because this ballot is about 21 hours, but it's not really about 21 hours. This is a ballot on workload, right? You can get a little bit caught up in the numbers, 21 hours, 90 minutes, and a lot of talk about all of those things. But when you boil it right down, this is a ballot about workload, a statutory postal ballot about workload. And the reason why we are running this ballot at this time, reason one why you need to vote yes and encourage others to do the same, is because our members have told us time and again that workload is a serious problem. So you and your colleagues have told us time and again that workload is a serious problem. Our latest workload report that was published in June, this was from our most recent all-member survey, in which I think it was over 11,000 of you gave responses. Only 17% of respondents said that they were very satisfied or satisfied with their workload levels generally. So that's less than 20% of our membership saying that, yeah, workload's okay for me, right? So that should be a bit of an alarm bell. 64% said that they can never complete all of the tasks assigned to them in their working week. So nearly 2/3 of you and your colleagues said they cannot overtake everything that they're asked to do in a 35-hour working week. And 73% of you said that you're rarely or are never able to do the necessary preparation and correction within the working week, and that's important because a big part of the debate at the moment is what should happen to the additional 1.5 hours, 90 minutes that would be freed up from class contact reduction, right? So bear in mind that almost 75% of you said you can't overtake everything that you do in that preparation and correction time within the allocated time that you're given at the moment. And 44% in that latest piece of research said that they usually work more than 7 hours extra per week, with 1/4 of those respondents saying that they work more than 15 hours additional each week over and above their 35 hours that they are paid for. And that is the equivalent of 2 additional working days every single week for those particular colleagues. For others, a day a week extra unpaid. So just let that sink in, the unfairness of that, the unhealthiness of that, the unsustainability of that, and that gives us a number of very big reasons as to why this workload ballot is going to be so critical. If we think back a few months before that, we published independent research, that's plenty of EIS research, that shows that workload is a significant problem. But we've also commissioned independent research from 3 sets of academics from 3 different UK universities who worked together, and they found that on average the teachers who engaged with that piece of research over the sort of target week were working on average 11.5 hours extra each week. And the 3 activities that consumed by far the largest time commitment outside of their contracted hours were planning and preparing lessons, preparing resources, and marking and preparing feedback for pupils. So again, everything that that we would understand would be fitted into that preparation and correction component of the contract. So these are core activities that are consistently reported as the main drivers of workload for our members. And they say that the amount of that work, the volume of that work, simply cannot be overtaken within contracted hours, such as they are balanced at the moment. And the research also found that there's a direct relationship between the level of work undertaken in evenings and weekends and our members' reported job satisfaction. So as teachers work longer hours outside of their contracted hours, they're increasingly likely to feel lower levels of job satisfaction. That was one of the key outcomes from that piece of independent research. And that's a story of persistent, excessive workload demands being placed on teachers at all grades and at all stages of their careers. And this is not confined to one pocket of the country or a couple of pockets of the country. This was across all 32 local authorities. The same messages were coming across consistently, strongly. So that's reason one as to why I would encourage you to vote yes in this ballot, and encourage your colleagues to do the same. Reason two is that ASN-related workload is reported to be a significant part of this really serious problem. Only 1% of respondents to our survey said that they have sufficient time in a typical working week to complete paperwork, liaise with colleagues and external agencies, and attend meetings in relation to supporting pupils with additional needs. So that really means that there are simply not enough staff with sufficient time to respond to the level and complexity of ASN need, such as it is in our schools at the moment. And you'll know the national data on this, that on average, slightly over 40% of children and young people have a recognised need, but we know that in some school communities, that can be up at about 70% of the children and young people in any one class, just depending on the particular demographic of that area. So ASN-related workload is another reason why we need to vote in the way that we're recommending in this ballot. And reason three, closely linked to both of these, is well-being. So work beyond teachers' contracted hours was the strongest predictor of perceived stress, irrespective of sector or role. So that's all the way through from early career, all the way through to promoted members of staff, reporting that working beyond their contracted hours was a really significant stressor for them. So that, and the critical thing about that too is that this work-related stress that's linked to workload being out of control leaves teachers feeling stressed within all aspects of their lives. This is not just when they're at work, Monday to Friday, whatever the configuration of your working week is. This is in all aspects of our members' lives. Only 25% of members that engaged in that survey said that they experienced positive work-related well-being. Okay, so 3/4 of them saying no, that things were not well with regards to their well-being. And 44% of that portion said that they experienced very poor or poor well-being related to their work. So that is really pretty critical. That's pretty critical. That's a pretty negative picture that our members are painting of the impact that working in this way, that you've all been working for a long time now, that's having a negative impact on your whole lives, not just your time at school, but the time that you should be spending with friends, family, during your holiday periods. I mean, how many of you in the last year have been ill over a holiday period? Put your hand up if you've been ill over a holiday period. Well, I think that's maybe about 80 to 90% of you. There's something not right there. There's something not right there about the work-life balance, the life-work balance, and the associated well-being. And that leads me on then to reason four. This is effectively a health and safety issue. If 80 to 90% of you have been ill during at least one holiday period over the last year, we're talking health and safety. And because we're talking stress and stress-related mental health, then we're talking health and safety as well. And if we think that 2/3 of our members say that they feel stressed frequently or all of the time, And what we understand, from international research, from creditable organisations like the World Health Organisation, what we understand about excessive working hours and the relationship between that and increased risk of stroke and heart conditions, right? We've got to think really, really seriously about that. So work jointly, not to scare you, but you do have to think, really, really critically about these things. Work that was jointly published by the World Health Organisation and the International Labour Organisation, previously published in the Lancet, it showed that long working hours is now known to be responsible for about 1/3 of the total estimated work-related burden of disease, and it's established as the risk factor with the largest occupational disease burden. Right, so you think about what that means for you. If you are one of those teachers who is habitually working a day to a day and a half to 2 weeks, two days per week extra every week, working into evenings way past the time when you should, working at weekends when you shouldn't be, working into holiday periods when you shouldn't be, you need to think about the long-term health consequences of that, and you need to think about the responsibility that you owe to yourself and to your families and your friends and those who love you, in terms of your long-term health that is going to be impacted by that type of working pattern, unsustainable working pattern. So it's a health and safety issue. And reason 5, because of these issues that I've highlighted around workload, around well-being, around poor work-life balance, around stress, around long-term health outcomes, reason 5 is that we're likely to lose teachers from the profession because of workload and other interrelated factors. Just talking to Caroline about that before the meeting began, about how there is this tightrope to tread. You all love your jobs, you love working with young people, but the conditions under which you're working are not fair, healthy or sustainable, and that gives you a different impression of your life and work as a teacher than it should. It's not the impression that you thought you were going to have when you entered the profession, whenever it was that you came and joined us. So we know that almost half of members who said that they plan to leave teaching within the next 5 years are considering doing that because they consider workload to be too high, and they can see the impacts that it's having on them, and they're starting to make life decisions based on that negative work-life balance, well-being experience that they're having. Reason 6, we know that this isn't a flash in the pan problem. It's a long-standing issue. This is not something that's just emerged post-COVID. This is an issue that has been burning away now for the best part of, well, it's a decade and a half really. There's been issues around workload, and it really does date back to the onset of austerity and the beginning of the cuts agenda that's impacted on local authorities, year upon year upon year, and then impacted upon schools year upon year upon year. So, it's a long-standing issue and one that we've finally got to really get to grips with. Reason 7, related to that, the problem was recognised by local and national government and all national agencies, including Education Scotland, between 2011 and 2014. That's how far back we've been talking about workload as a chronic issue that really Scotland needs to get by the scruff of the neck. Some of you might remember the series of Tackling Bureaucracy reports. Do you remember those? All that work that was done at national level, the reports that came out about things that teachers shouldn't be doing, all that needless bureaucracy that uses up so much of their time. And there was a whole swathe of recommendations and guidance issued after guidance issued about how we could tackle this in schools. And what did it come to? Nothing, right? The situation is worse now rather than having been impacted positively by any of that work. It didn't work. That tackling bureaucracy work didn't work, okay? So we've got to look for different solutions, and this ballot is an opportunity for us to pursue a different solution to those that have been offered so far. You might remember, those of you who are secondary teachers, reason 8, the EIS had to threaten industrial action on NQ workload a few years back. Do you remember that? 2017, I think it was around about then, 2017, and that was because of the excessive workload that teachers in secondary in particular were experiencing as a result of the way that the qualifications had been configured. So again, we won the argument on that. We won the argument about the extent of teacher workload in the secondary sector, and we did succeed in getting unit assessments removed, but still SQA related bureaucracy has been a significant driver of workload since in the secondary sector, and more needs to be done. So there's an opportunity here to do something material about that as well. Think back to the Value Education, Value Teachers campaign. Reason 9, where we had, in that pay settlement, when we finally won it, after turning out 30,000 of us on the streets of Glasgow on that sunny October Saturday, and John Swinney was convinced that we would actually move to industrial action, so he thought he'd better do something, and we got a pay offer that finally was acceptable, and also written into that pay offer was a commitment for Scottish Government and COSLA to work together to tackle excessive teacher workload and to do something positive to impact on teacher well-being. So that was back in 2018, I think, that deal was finally signed. And since then, teacher workload has done nothing but spiral further out of control. So things again have got worse rather than better. But way back then, there was a formal national agreement that said teacher workload is a problem and we're going to work together to solve it. And that promise, has not been delivered. Which brings us to reason 10. So because that promise wasn't acted upon in sufficiently swift time, in January 2020, you might remember that the EIS launched our 2020 campaign. So that was that long-range campaign with the objectives of bringing about the kind of teaching and learning conditions that teachers and pupils have in many other parts of the OECD. So workload reduction would be a key outcome of the realisation of those objectives: smaller class sizes, much more non-class contact time for all of that time that you need to prepare everything around learning, teaching and assessment, including feedback. And we promised members back in January 2020, that we'd press for these things. And unlike some of our politicians, we keep our promises. The EIS is an organisation that keeps its promises to members. When members have told us that something is really important to them, and when we say that we are going to work really hard to bring about positive change for them, then we stick to the promises that we have made. And that campaign being launched back in 2020 was the beginning of that. And everybody knew what our objectives were around that. National government knew, local government knew, all the national agencies knew, and all our members knew as well. So we are definitely sticking to that. And because we launched that campaign in January 2020, this brings me to reason 11. The SNP manifesto included a promise in early 2021 to reduce teacher workload by reducing class contact time to a maximum of 21 hours per week. And this wasn't conditional on cuts to be made elsewhere. It didn't say in the manifesto we'll use ASN, money that we would otherwise spend on ASN provision to do that. It didn't say that they would cut teacher pay or suppress teacher pay in order to pay for that. This was an unconditional commitment, unconditional promise that was made, and we've been very, very clear that we expect that manifesto commitment will be honoured, and we expect it to be honoured without expense to teachers or any other part of the education service, and it certainly won't be off the backs of hard-pressed head teachers, deputy head teachers or principal teachers, who some of whom I understand fear that it might be them who has to pay for this. So we are very clear that SNP manifesto made a promise to teachers, made a promise to pupils, and in fact made a promise to the whole electorate to finally invest properly in education by investing in the teacher workforce, because they'd said for years before that they were going to do it and they hadn't delivered, and now this was them writing it in black and white into a manifesto that they were going to do it, and we have held their feet to the fire on that. And it's absolutely right that we press government to honour promises that they've made to our members, to the children and young people that we teach, and to the parents who care about the outcomes from their education. And then linked to that, reason 12, that same manifesto, alongside that promise to cut teacher workload by reducing class contact time, there was the promise of 3,500 additional teachers to help deliver on the class contact reduction. Today, we have, at the last census count, now we're about to get a new census count in December, so it'll be interesting to see what that is, but the census count in December 2024 showed that we were more than 600 teachers fewer than we had been the previous year, and we have fewer teachers overall than we had in 2007. So we had 55,100 teachers in 2007, and at the last census count we had 53,412, so that's an overall drop of 1,688 teachers. So you just think about that for a minute and you start to get a sense of why you're all having to put in the hours that you're having to put in. And a big part of the reason for that is because We are 1,688 teachers down from where we were in 2007, and the pupil roll is for primary a little bit in decline at the minute, but it hasn't been, that there hasn't been decline in the pupil roll that would offset that drop in teacher numbers over that period. And in fact, at points the pupil population has actually risen. So that fall in teacher numbers is a significant reason why the majority of teachers are working on average 11.5 hours extra a week unpaid. And effectively they are massively subsidising an education service that's significantly understaffed. And if you think about the curricular changes that have come in that over that time, if you think about the way the ASN legislation has developed over that time, if you think about GIRFEC and what that has meant, and if you think about the exponential increase in the number of children with additional support needs and the complexity of those needs, and if you think that we are minus 1,688 teachers, a lot of this starts to make sense. And the bottom line is, it is not fair work. That is not delivering fair work for Scotland's teachers, who are having to shoulder the burden of that significant deficit in the size of the teacher workforce, with a real kind of like mushrooming in terms of the level of demand that has been placed upon teachers. And in the meeting that we had this afternoon along at headquarters there, we were talking about how teachers in quarter of the way through the 21st century are not only providing quality learning, teaching and assessment experiences for children and young people, they're doing so much of the pastoral work, the kind of like work that would have been done previously by social work, by health. There's so much burden placed on schools now that it's really a result of services being squeezed elsewhere as well. But effectively, we don't have proper staffing of a vital public service like education, and we don't have proper staffing of other vital public services, but education seems to be the kind of last person standing, if you like, when all of the others are perhaps simply not able to deliver and say that they won't deliver. Schools don't have that same luxury, if that's a luxury. Reason 13, linked to all of this, the number of ASN teachers in all sectors in 2010 was 3,524, and in 2024, 2,844. So that's a decline of almost 20%, 19.3%, 680 teachers in total, and we know that ASN levels are now at 40%, as we were saying at the beginning. So that is a bad situation for young people with additional support needs. It's a bad situation for the other kids in the class who don't have additional support needs, and it's a really bad situation for the teachers who often, as one person, are trying to respond to that array of need in the room. They're the only adult in the room, and we know that there's a real squeeze on the support that can come from support assistants as well, because there aren't enough of them either for all the numbers of kids who've got these really significant needs now. And then, if we think about the irony, reason 14, the irony of the fact that thousands, so while this is the situation for those who've got permanent jobs, there are thousands of qualified teachers who aren't able to get permanent work, right? So that really, really harsh irony that you've got a significant proportion of the teacher workforce permanently employed and overworked, and then you've got thousands of other teachers qualified, ready and waiting to come and assist, who are significantly underemployed or even unemployed, right? That is not a situation that really we wish to hold much longer. And that's what last week's day of, was it 2 weeks ago? Yeah, just over, nearly 2 weeks ago, our day of action was about. Remember the Wear Red? Now, I promise I haven't been wearing this suit for the last 10 days, right? I have been changing my clothes, but that was about drawing attention to that really harsh anomaly or irony of that kind of like overwork, underemployment kind of situation. And just to kind of like, highlight a bit further, for the 2023-24 cohort, the proportion of TIS probationers in a full-time permanent post at the end of the following year's census was only 25%. Only 25% of them got jobs, and that was down from 29% of the previous cohort. And that continues to be a long time decrease, because that stat was at 57%. Not that that's brilliant, but that was at 57% in 2016-17 school session. So there has been a decline each year in the number of post probationers who are then able to get a permanent job. So yeah, really worrying situation in regards to precarity, and the relationship between the manifesto commitment to reduce class contact time, reduce workload, linking it to the employment of more teachers. For us, that has to be a no-brainer, because we've got significant numbers of members who are not able to get permanent work, and they've been raising that as an issue with us as well. And meanwhile, we've got year upon year upon year upon year of data from our members in all different forms saying that workload and overwork is a serious issue. Reason 15, we're a campaigning union. So when we secure a win, we really need to build on it. We don't stand still, we don't rest on our laurels, we don't become complacent, we build on the win. And if we think back, value education, value teachers, the collective action that we took back then won us a 13% pay rise over 3 years, okay? But we didn't go, oh, that's very good, and then sit back and do nothing more after that. We built the momentum for the Pay Attention campaign, and we won 14.6% from that over 2 years. So that strike action that you all took resulted in that really significant win for our members, that they will get the benefit from, those of them who are in permanent work, for the rest of their careers. But again, we didn't sort of like sit on our laurels, rest on our laurels and congratulate ourselves, month after month, bathing in the kind of, the success of all of that. We built for Stand Up for Quality Education, because when we were on picket lines, when we were having branch meetings, when we were having our rallies, our members were all saying that they were absolutely committed to that strike action, absolutely committed to going after the pay rise at that time, but they wanted the EIS as a union to really get stronger on the workload issue as the very next priority. So that's why in 2023 at our AGM in Aviemore, we launched the Stand Up for Quality Education campaign, because we'd listened to what our members had said. And that workload component of that campaign was about increasing teacher workload numbers and workforce numbers and roles. It was about reduction in weekly class contact time and reduction in class size to 20, so reviving the 2020 campaign. It was about eliminating unnecessary bureaucracy, and it was about using all the messaging around the empowered school system, particularly through the use of working time agreements from our point of view, in order to push back on a lot of the unnecessary workload that was coming the way of our members. And really my message about all of this is that when we build, as a campaigning union, when we sort of like build like that, and gather momentum and build momentum towards the pursuit of particular objectives that matter to our members, sometimes we need to ballot. As part of those campaigns, sometimes we need to ballot. So we can do the branch meetings, we can do the lettering, the MSPs, we can do the petitions, we can do the social media stunts, we can do all that. But at the end of the day, often what it's coming to these days, because of the way that politics is interfacing with the kind of fiscal framework at the moment, is that balloting is the thing that makes the politicians think again, right? And makes them think differently from what they've told us they're thinking up until that point. And in respect of workload and us really trying to shift the dial on workload, the time to ballot is absolutely now. The time for the statutory ballot is absolutely now. And reason 16, when the EIS and our members act, it has positive outcomes. So even within this Stand Up for Quality Education campaign so far, we have actually gained some traction, and some quite significant traction. So on ASN, like one of the components of the campaign is to get better resourcing for ASN provision, given the level of need that there is currently. And we have absolutely succeeded on getting ASN to be high on the political agenda, right? It's been talked about all over Parliament, it's talked about in the media almost every week. In fact, we've been asked to, I think it's the Sunday Post just got in touch today, asking us if we would do like a kind of interview with them for a forthcoming piece that they want to have a big ASN focus on. The Herald, we've done the Herald as well, done BBC, there's been lots of media attention on it as well, and that's because of the pushing and the pressing that the EIS has done on this over the last 2 years. And you might know that in December of last year, the Cabinet Secretary, because of the pressure that we'd been applying, pledged an extra £29 million for local authorities to be diverted towards ASN support. Now, we know 29 million divided by 32 is not an awful lot of money, but the point is that we've won the argument on it. We've won the argument about the lack of resourcing. She has also committed to a review of ASN resourcing, so that's about to get underway as well. And again, you know, as I'm saying, that's because of the work that we have done. Now that we've done it in collaboration with others, we released a joint statement across all unions that organise in the education sector. We had parents groups on board. We launched that last May and got some publicity around it. And then we did a parliamentary event last December that invited a lot of those partners along. I talked about the issues, got the Cabinet Secretary to come along. So that all that political pressure is absolutely worthwhile applying, but still it's not delivered everything that we need, and that's why this ballot is so important. And linked to that, Reason 17, SNCT negotiations have been underway all this time from 2021 after the SNP was re-elected to government. There's been discussion about 21 hours and how it could be done, and you know what approaches we might take, and we're still waiting for an implementation plan from the Scottish Government and COSLA to come forward. We've done all the lobbying, we've done, as I said, all these different stunts, all these different, you know, political kind of pressure increasing activities, but they haven't delivered the outcome that we need. So, if I go back to the SNCT in particular, the Cabinet Secretary, and back to last December, that was a busy month for the Cabinet Secretary because she did pledge the additional £29 million for ESN, and she also shook hands with COSLA in relation to an additional £45 million that they were receiving from the Scottish Government to assist with the implementation of the manifesto commitments. So they shook hands on that and said that they were going to work at pace together to bring forward an implementation plan to the SNCT, that's our National Negotiating Committee. So we said, okay, right, we'll be patient, we'll give you just short of 2 months to get that plan to us. We set the deadline for the 3rd of February 2025, and I think we are now just about coming up on 290 days past that deadline, and we still don't have an implementation plan. Now, do you get that luxury as teachers? You know, your head teacher asks you for something, or your faculty head asks you for something, or you know, you've got reports to provide for parents. Do you get 290 days grace when you don't meet the original deadline? No, you absolutely do not. So, you know, we lodged a dispute about that on the 7th of February of this year on the lack of progress, and critically also the unwillingness of either COSLA or the Scottish Government to even agree that the 90 minutes that would be freed up would go into the preparation and correction component of the contract, because the bottom line is that if it doesn't go there, the situation regarding workload that we've outlined very, very carefully up until this point is going to get worse rather than better. More meetings, more preparatory work to do for meetings, more outcomes from meetings, you know, more work to do in departments or individually as a result of those meetings. So that dispute has been ongoing since the 7th of February, and still nothing. Reason 18, we need to keep building the campaign, building the pressure. So when nothing came, we were promised a report at the end of June as well, that was the other thing. So promised a report at the end of June. June came, June went, the whole summer holidays passed, we came back in August, still no implementation plan. Over that time, obviously, our consultative ballot was running, and we had really pretty strong engagement with that ballot, with almost 2/3 of our members engaging with it, and overwhelming support for both strike action and actions short of strike in pursuit of this dispute. And that definitely put pressure on the Scottish Government, because a week before that ballot closed, they sort of came running to us again, promising that they would work at pace again, work at pace again on implementation, and asking the trade unions to sort of be involved in discussions about that again, because they'd kept us out for a few months as well. So we said, okay, we won't press the button straight away on a statutory ballot. We'll pause. We'll enter into this latest round of negotiations in good faith. On the 18th of September, to hurry things along a bit, we gave them a solutions-focused proposal on a way forward that might have given them a little bit of what they wanted in regards to how preparation and correction time might be viewed in the 21st century, and definitely what we needed by way of red line kind of articulation of the fact that we couldn't have the time going anywhere else. But we have still no response to that proposal. We have had no response by COSLA, no response by the Scottish Government, and so we absolutely have to up the pressure. So the statutory ballot is critical to doing that. Talked a little bit about elections, which brings me to reason 19, and the fact that we've got to seize the day. in terms of the political context that we're currently in. Any action that even the balloting and any action that might flow from that balloting, it will have an impact on the next Scottish Parliament election, which takes place in May. Elections make politicians nervous, right? They make politicians nervous. So this is a good time for us to be threatening industrial action, threatening to close schools, because let's face it, if the EIS opts for, if its members opt for strike action, it will close every school in Scotland, as we did during Pay Attention. And the reality of that will not be lost on those who are posturing for political positioning come the elections. In terms of the other part of the ballot, it's about strike action, but it's also about action short of strike. We're talking non-compliance with HMI inspection-related activities, including inspection visits. Right? Think about how much of a blow that would be to the national data gathering kind of obsession. Refusal to administer, implement, or process any aspect of Scottish National Standardised Assessments or any other local authority or school-based equivalents. Non-compliance with local authority quality assurance procedures, authority inspections, learning visits, or other equivalents. So think about how that would impact, the National Improvement Framework, or the local authority quality assurance processes, the HMIE data gathering. Really quite carefully crafted ASOS. The kids won't care about any of that. It's not impacting negatively on the kids. Parents won't care about any of that. You're not saying we're not doing reports or parents' nights or anything like that. It's all the stuff that is got high political tariff nationally and locally, so it's very, very carefully crafted. And the other thing to remember is that council elections are coming up in 2027, so they might be feeling a wee bit more relaxed at the moment, but if this dispute were to continue, much beyond May 2026, then we're in range for the local elections as well. And I'm now at reason 20, you'll be glad to know. Scotland has got one of the highest numbers of class contact hours for teachers in the world, right? We are, if you think about the weekend sporting activities, right, we should be hanging our heads in shame on the rugby front and on the football front, and we should be hanging our heads in shame when we think where we are in terms of these league tables relative to class contact time and relative to class size. We're amongst the hardest working, and not in a good way, in the OECD. There are countries in the OECD territories that have twice the amount of preparation and correction time that you do, right? Twice the amount of preparation and correction time that you do. And it's not that they're working 45-hour working weeks. They've got similar working weeks, but it's just much more sensibly balanced in terms of teaching time and time for preparation and correction. So if this can be done in other parts of the OECD, bear in mind that Scotland is part of the UK, which is, I think, the 5th or the 6th richest country in the world, then we can properly invest in our education system such that it's sustainable and that our teachers are properly supported as professionals to do the really important work that they do. And then last reason, Education 21, and it's reason 21, we've been kind of talking about it, or I've been talking about it this afternoon. Education is a vital public service, and it's a quintessential social good. EIS believes that. And we also see it that there's an existential need to invest properly in educators and in education, because it brings benefits obviously for the children and young people who are in the system in the here and now, but it brings benefits for our society for decades and generations to come. So what you do is not flash in the pan. That is investing in society for the long term. It's investing in all of us for the long term. So, education is important in and of itself to have citizens who are well educated, so that, we get all the economic, social, health, criminal justice benefits that come from that, and the individual and collective prosperity that comes from investing properly in an education service that has positive health and well-being outcomes. You think about Scotland's health outcomes compared to other parts of the world. And if we think at the minute about what's happening in terms of social cohesion and the lack thereof, and the importance of education in building a citizenship that can think critically and can identify misinformation, disinformation, and know how to challenge it. These things are really, really important, and they are growing in significance by the day. So we need to think about the growth of the far right and what that means for our education service, what that means for our educators, and the importance of all of that. And internationally, education unions are agreed that education is a bulwark against, what we're seeing emerge in terms of, the emboldenment of the far right and the re-emergence of a lot of prejudice and hate and division that we thought that perhaps, we might have left safely behind in the 1940s, but it would seem not quite so. So I think I've given you 21 really good reasons to vote in this ballot. 21 really good reasons to encourage all your colleagues, EIS colleagues, to vote in this ballot and to vote yes for strike, yes for action short of strike. And remembering that this is not an electronic ballot, remembering that you've got to actually physically open the envelope that comes to you, take out the ballot paper, use a pen, all of that, put it back in, take it to a post box and send it back to Civica in London, and don't leave it until the Christmas post starts to become a real issue. We already know that the postal service is under great strain, so we want to vote, and we want to vote early. So 21 good reasons to vote and 21 good reasons to engage in all of the recommended campaigning activities that we will be encouraging over the next couple of months. So that's branch meetings. I'm really delighted at the turnout that we've managed to get here today. People are exhausted, I know that, but really brilliant that you've come. Your local association meetings. There's a national webinar tomorrow. I'll be saying a lot of the same things tomorrow as I've said today. I'll probably shorten it a little bit. Other colleagues will be echoing what I'm saying. But if there's colleagues of yours who've not been able to make it today, encourage them to join the national webinar. There'll be also the opportunity to ask questions. We're going to be doing a whole series of Advent actions from the 1st of December onwards. There's going to be Christmas cards to MSPs and councillors, so some fun things in there. But really 21 reasons overall to work for a super majority, not just a just make it over the line type of majority. I mean, it's still legally valid, but we want a super majority so that we've got super leverage with the people who make the decisions as to how this promise is actually going to be honoured and implemented. And 21 reasons as to how together, as the strong campaigning union that the EIS is, we can win another super victory for Scotland's teachers, but this time on workload. So thanks very much for listening, everybody, and happy to take any questions that you might have.